when silence is no longer an option. A school where power decides everything. At Rivertown High, the rules were unwritten but universally understood. The students who thrived weren't necessarily the smartest or the most hardworking. Instead, power belonged to the privileged, and privilege meant protection. If you had the right last name, the right connections, you could get away with anything. For years, Jaden Carter had mastered the art of blending in. Being one of the few black students in a predominantly white school meant attention was a dangerous thing. His mother's advice had always been clear: keep your head down, don't start trouble. It's easier that way. But Jaden's grandfather, Elijah Carter, had told him something different. A man can only be pushed so far before he's got to push back. Jaden had never tested that theory until now. The power of fear and the people who exploit it. At the top of Rivertown High's social hierarchy was Troy Henshaw, the son of the town's police chief. He wasn't just a bully, he was a predator. Unlike the usual schoolyard tyrants who thrived on fists and threats, Troy's true power came from knowing that the system would always protect him. Teachers turned a blind eye. Administrators made excuses. And his father? He didn't just ignore his son's behavior, he enabled it. Troy had never lost a fight. Not because he was the strongest, but because he never had to fight fair. His victims never fought back because they knew, if they did, the consequences wouldn't fall on Troy. They would fall on them. Jaden knew this all too well. That's why he stayed invisible. That's why he avoided confrontation. But then Troy made a mistake. He went after the wrong person. A line crossed when fear turns into action. Jaden had learned to navigate around Troy, like walking past a sleeping snake. But his 12-year-old sister, Amara, didn't know the rules yet. She hadn't learned to shrink herself. She hadn't learned to stay quiet when she was mistreated. And that made her a perfect target. It started with small things. A shove in the hallway. A stolen lunch. Jaden told her to ignore it. They want a reaction. Don't give it to them. But Troy wasn't looking for a reaction. He was looking for a victim. And one afternoon, he pushed things too far. Jaden was walking home when he heard it. That kind of laughter that makes your stomach turn. The kind that meant someone was in trouble. He followed the sound and saw her. Amara, trapped against a brick wall. Her backpack held high above her head while Troy and his friends circled like vultures. Come on, just say it, Troy taunted. Say you're sorry for being such a little freak, and maybe I'll give it back. Amara stood her ground. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Troy shoved her. Not hard enough to leave a mark, but just enough. Enough to make her feel small. Enough to make sure she knew who had the power. Jaden didn't think. He didn't hesitate. Before he even realized what he was doing, he was across the alley, grabbing Troy's wrist mid-motion. The laughter stopped. The air shifted. For the first time in his life, Jaden wasn't invisible anymore. The dangerous game of restraint. Troy turned, a smirk still playing on his lips. Oh look, Big Brother's here to play hero. Jaden's grip tightened. Let her go. Troy chuckled, pulling his arm back. Relax, man. We're just having some fun. But Jaden wasn't laughing. He could feel the rage bubbling inside him, screaming for release. He wanted to hit Troy, badly, and that's exactly what Troy wanted. Troy wasn't afraid of a fight. He was waiting for one, because if Jaden hit him first, the consequences wouldn't be on Troy. They would be on Jaden, and he knew it. So Jaden did the hardest thing he had ever done. He let go. He turned away. He walked away, and behind him, Troy laughed. That's what I thought, Troy sneered. You're just like everyone else. Too scared to do anything about it. Jaden kept walking, but deep in his gut, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. The fire that wouldn't die. That night, Jaden couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Troy's face. That smirk. That arrogant certainty. That confidence that no matter what he did, he would never have to answer for it. Jaden's fists clenched under the blankets. His jaw ached from grinding his teeth. He had done the right thing. He had walked away. So why did it feel like he had lost? His grandfather, Elijah Carter, saw it immediately. You gonna tell me what happened? Elijah asked at dinner. Jaden didn't answer, but Amara did. It was Troy. Elijah nodded like he already knew. He put his fork down and looked at Jaden. And you didn't do anything about it? Jaden tensed. What was I supposed to do? If I hit him, I'd be the one in trouble, not him. Elijah sighed, leaning back in his chair. You're not wrong. But tell me something. Does doing nothing feel right? Jaden exhaled, shaking his head. Elijah studied him for a moment, then stood up. Come with me. Training for a fight that wasn't just physical. The garage smelled like sweat and sawdust. A punching bag swayed gently from the ceiling. Elijah had trained in this garage for decades. His fists had broken bones and shattered expectations. Jaden had trained here too, but until now it had just been a skill. Tonight it was something more. Elijah crossed his arms, watching Jaden step forward. You fight like you're already mad at yourself. Jaden froze mid-swing. He stared at his grandfather, heart pounding. Elijah tilted his head. Let me guess. You wanted to hit him, but you didn't. And now you're wondering if you made the wrong choice. Jaden swallowed hard. He wanted me to swing first. If I had, I would have been the one in trouble. Elijah nodded. You were smart. But being smart don't always feel good. Does it? Jaden exhaled sharply. His grandfather stepped closer. You're playing by their rules, boy. You're waiting for them to be fair. But they won't be. Bullies like Troy? They don't stop until they're made to stop. And when you hit back, Elijah's eyes burned into Jaden's. You better make damn sure it counts. Jaden's hands clenched at his sides. He knew Troy wasn't done. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. The fight that changed everything. The fire inside Jaden Carter didn't die that night. If anything, it burned brighter. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just angry at Troy. He was angry at the system that let people like Troy exist without consequences. And that anger? It was about to fuel a fight that would shake Rivertown High to its core. The second confrontation, this time, Jaden fights back. Jaden didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Troy came back for more. Jaden had just finished basketball practice when he heard it. Amara's voice, sharp and angry. He turned the corner behind the school and saw the same scene as before. Troy, his goons, his sister, on the ground, her backpack spilled, books scattered like debris. And just like before, Troy was smiling. Only this time, Jaden didn't hesitate. He moved fast, faster than Troy expected. He reached for Amara's arm first, helping her up, making sure she was okay. And that's when Troy shoved him. Not playfully, not like a joke. Hard, aggressive, a challenge. Jaden stumbled back a step but caught himself easily. Troy was expecting fear. What he got instead? Unshakable confidence. Come on, Carter, Troy sneered. Do something. Jaden didn't move. He stayed still, steady, calm, just like Elijah had taught him. Let them think they have control. Troy smirked, then swung. Big mistake. Jaden saw it coming. The punch was sloppy, all anger, no precision. He sidestepped at the last second, making Troy punch nothing but air. The momentum threw Troy off balance, just for a second. But a second was all Jaden needed. One sharp jab to the ribs. Not reckless, not wild, just enough force to send a message. Troy gasped, staggering back. His friends, they weren't laughing anymore. Troy's face twisted with shock. He swung again, but this time Jaden didn't just dodge. He stepped in. A quick, clean elbow strike below the shoulder. Another sharp shove, sending Troy stumbling backward. Troy caught himself just before he hit the ground, barely standing. For the first time, he hesitated. For the first time, he wasn't sure he could win. Jaden could see it in his eyes, the realization, the doubt. And then, Troy turned and walked away. His friends lingered for just a second, exchanging nervous glances, then followed him. Jaden let out a slow breath. Beside him, Amara stepped closer, her knuckles white around her backpack straps. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded. Then, after a pause, Are you? Jaden exhaled, watching Troy disappear down the sidewalk. He knew this wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came next. The aftermath, when the system fights back. The next morning, Jaden walked into Rivertown High expecting whispers. He had been in enough fights to know that word traveled fast. But this was different. This wasn't just a fight. This was him, one of the only black students in school, standing up to Troy Henshaw. And that was something people weren't supposed to do. People didn't just whisper. They stared. Some looked impressed, even respectful. Others, they looked nervous, like Jaden had broken some unspoken rule. Troy was nowhere to be seen, but Jaden knew better than to think it was over. By second period, he got his answer. A voice crackled through the intercom. Jaden Carter, report to the principal's office immediately. The setup, when power plays dirty. The moment Jaden stepped into the office, he knew it was a setup. Principal Reynolds sat behind his desk. But he wasn't alone. In the corner of the room, arms crossed, stood Chief Henshaw, Troy's father. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Jaden's jaw tightened. Reynolds cleared his throat. Jaden, do you know why you're here? Jaden glanced at Chief Henshaw. No. Henshaw chuckled. A low, condescending sound. Don't play dumb, son. You put my boy in the dirt yesterday. Jaden didn't flinch. Your boy put his hands on my sister first. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Henshaw's expression didn't change. I don't give a damn what you think happened, he said, voice dropping lower. Here's what I know. Troy came home last night with a busted lip, talking about how some thug jumped him. Jaden clenched his fists. He wanted to say something, to fight back. But Elijah's words echoed in his head. Bullies like Troy don't stop until they're made to stop. And when you do hit back, you better make damn sure it counts. Henshaw smiled, slow and smug. I had a nice little chat with Principal Reynolds here. We agreed violence like this can't go unpunished. Jaden's stomach dropped. Reynolds cleared his throat again. We're suspending you, Jaden, indefinitely. Jaden's hands tightened into fists at his sides. For defending myself? Henshaw scoffed. Defending yourself? Kid, you're lucky I'm not pressing charges. Jaden exhaled, his chest burning. It didn't matter what actually happened. It didn't matter that Troy swung first. This wasn't about justice. It was about power. Jaden forced himself to stay calm. And what about Troy? Reynolds shifted again. We'll be handling that internally. Jaden laughed. A short, sharp sound, right? Which means nothing's going to happen to him. Henshaw's smirk widened. Now you're getting it. Jaden wanted to argue, wanted to fight. But what was the point? The decision had already been made before he even walked through that door. Reynolds sighed, rubbing his temples. Go home, Jaden. We'll let you know when you're allowed to return. Jaden turned on his heel and walked out without another word. But in his head, one thought was already forming. They think they can silence me. They're wrong. Suspension. That was their solution. Not punishing Troy. Not holding him accountable. Just getting rid of the problem, Jaden. But what Chief Henshaw and Principal Reynolds didn't understand was this. Jaden wasn't the problem. He was the spark. And by trying to silence him, they had lit a fire that couldn't be put out. The moment of realization, Jaden's next move. That night, Jaden sat on the front porch, staring out into the quiet street. The weight of everything pressed down on him heavier than any punch he had ever thrown. His grandfather, Elijah Carter, stepped outside, taking a slow sip of his coffee. I take it the meeting didn't go well? Jaden let out a bitter laugh. They suspended me. Elijah didn't look surprised. Troy. Jaden shook his head. Not even a slap on the wrist. Elijah exhaled through his nose. That's how it is in towns like this. Jaden clenched his fists. So that's it? I just take the hit and move on. Elijah studied him for a long moment. Then he set his mug down. No. Jaden frowned. Then what am I supposed to do? Elijah leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. You think you're the only kid Troy's done this to? Jaden blinked. The thought hadn't really sunk in before. But now, staring at his grandfather, it was obvious. He wasn't the only one. He wasn't even the first. And that changed everything. Because if Troy had hurt others, that meant Jaden wasn't alone. And if he wasn't alone, then Troy wasn't as untouchable as he thought. Building a movement, the power of many. Jaden spent the next 24 hours thinking. Not just about what happened in that office. Not just about how easily they had erased him from the school, like he was the problem instead of Troy, but about what Elijah had said. What happens when everybody Troy ever pushed around decides they ain't scared of him anymore? That question burrowed into Jaden's mind. And he knew what he had to do. The first person he called? Eric Jennings. The forgotten victims, Jaden's team forms. Eric had been Troy's favorite target before Jaden came along. Skinny, quiet, kept to himself. The year before, Troy had cornered him outside the gym and broken his nose for fun. Nothing had ever happened. No detention. No suspension. Eric's parents had complained, but Chief Henshaw had smoothed it over. Boys will be boys. That's what the school had told them. Eric had transferred schools after that. But Jaden still had his number. When Eric picked up, his voice was wary. Carter? What do you want? Jaden didn't waste time. I need your help. A pause. With what? Jaden's voice was steady. Troy. Another pause. Longer this time. Then softly. I'm listening. The list grew, the unspoken stories. By noon, Jaden had a list. Eric Jennings, broken nose, transferred schools. Jordan Lopez, bullied into isolation, stopped speaking in class. Maya Green, pushed down the stairs, injured for weeks. Charlie Sims, cornered behind the locker room, humiliated daily. And that was just the beginning. By evening, the list had doubled. By the next morning, Jaden had a movement. They met behind the old rec center, away from school. Away from anyone who could report back to the wrong people. Jaden stood in front of them, looking at the faces around him. Some were angry, some were nervous, but all of them had the same thing in their eyes. They were done being afraid. The plan, how to beat the system. Jaden took a deep breath. We all know what's going on. His voice was steady, despite the weight of what he was doing. Troy's been running this school like he owns it. He does whatever he wants because his dad cleans up his mess. A few people nodded. And every time we let it slide, every time we don't fight back, he wins. Maya crossed her arms. And what exactly are we supposed to do? He's already got you kicked out. Jaden met her gaze. Yeah. And if we don't do something, I won't be the last. Eric nodded. So what's the plan? Jaden's grip tightened. We go public. All of us. Every story. Every fight. Every threat. Maya exhaled. You realize if we do this, Troy's not just going to let it go. Jaden nodded. I know. Charlie hesitated. What if people don't believe us? Jaden pulled out his phone. His ace. A video. He hit play. The footage was shaky, recorded from behind a half-open locker. But the audio, crystal clear. Troy's voice, dripping with arrogance. Come on, Carter. Do something. Then the shove. Then Troy throwing the first punch. Silence followed. Jaden looked around. We don't just have words. His eyes burned with determination. We have proof. Eric grinned. Damn right we do. Maya cracked her knuckles. Let's take this bastard down. Jaden exhaled. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The final stand, justice in the public eye. The gym was packed. Students filled the bleachers. Teachers lined the walls. The school board sat stiffly behind a long table. And in the center of it all, Troy Henshaw, sitting beside his father, smug, like he had already won. The school had called this meeting to discuss student safety. But everyone knew the truth. This was about Troy. This was about who would control the story. Chief Henshaw spoke first. Let's not waste time. My son was attacked. Humiliated. The room was silent. Until Maya stood up. You want to talk about violence? She faced the crowd. Where was this concern when Troy pushed me down the stairs? Charlie stepped forward. Or when he made my life hell for months? Eric's voice cut through the air. Or when he broke my nose and got away with it? The crowd stirred. Then Jaden stepped forward and hit play. The video filled the gym. Troy's own words, his own actions, the truth. And just like that, Troy wasn't untouchable anymore. Fire the ending ice shift in power. Troy was suspended indefinitely. Chief Henshaw lost control of the narrative. Jaden, he wasn't just reinstated. He was a leader. And for the first time in Rivertown High's history, the system didn't win. Collision final message. When one person stands up, they can be ignored. But when everyone stands together, that's how you break the cycle. Like, share and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Rocket. This isn't just a story, it's a message. A reminder that standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's necessary. When people come together, real change happens. Fire if this story inspired you. Show your support. White heavy checkmark like this video to spread awareness. Loudspeaker share it with your friends. Because conversations like this matter. Bell subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful stories like this one. Speech balloon, what do you think? Drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced injustice? Let's keep the conversation going. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.